So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things that LTAPs do. How many LTAPs are there in here? Am I there? Oh, here we go. We got one. Good. If you don't know what LTAPs are, local technical assistance programs, and each state has one, and we're primarily to help the cities, towns, and counties with their needs as far as training goes and stuff like that. So I wanted to just kind of go through our presentation a little bit on some of the things that we do. And these are all photos of Utah. And so I wanted to kind of also give you a little taste, if you don't ever get that far away from the ocean here, at least you kind of know what it looks like, okay? This happens to be the water pocket fold that they call, goes from flat up to the mountains real fast, and it's kind of a pretty area. Utah, basically, we've got local governments. UDOT has about 5,800 miles of roads in their jurisdiction. The local governments have basically about 25 or 30,000 miles in their area. So we have quite a few miles that we have to deal with. We help and assist the cities and towns throughout the state with their training. Do a lot of heavy equipment training with some of our people. And also we do a lot of training for their technical folks. Utah has 29 counties and 245 cities, and generally speaking, these are the ones that we coordinate with quite a bit. We have developed, many of you remember Deutsch Bowling, probably a few of you that have been around for a few years. He was my predecessor. And he started this TAMS program way back then. We've had about 3 or 4 revisions since then. And basically what it is, it's an evaluation, pavement evaluation for each one of these cities and towns. And we've done quite a few of them over the years. We assist the governments with their needs. Basically, we're trying to evaluate road conditions for each one of our segments of roads. We've got quite a few of them, 33,000 miles of it in Utah. And so what we're trying to do is help the local governments, which usually don't have as many funding opportunities as some of the bigger cities do, and some of the states and counties. So we have done pavement management for about 124 cities and counties in our state with what we call the Transportation Asset Management System, TAMS. I heard somebody else had a program that kind of sounded the same. That's our Utah version, at least. We've also assisted 9 Forest Service areas in and around Utah with their needs as far as evaluating their roads and telling them basically where they need to go with their maintenance and whatnot. So this is happens to be a picture of central Utah, kind of typical of what we see in our area. You've got mountains very, very close to the valleys, the mountains, and then you've got these canyons that come in through the rivers that come through here, and these are all alluvial fan areas that have built up over the years. They can't build up anymore because it's all developed anymore, and as a result we have to keep the river in one spot, and it keeps getting higher and higher and higher and higher, and then before you know it, it's about 2 or 3 feet higher than the ground around it, and gives us problems. So then we end up having to recut the ditches and the rivers and that kind of stuff to make it work. We've got the foothills up in here. This is where the rich people like to live, and interestingly enough, they're all floating off the mountain. And then we've got essentially the valley areas, and then generally speaking, all the way along the Wasatch Front. This happens to be Utah Lake. It's a pretty good sized lake that we deal with, and then Great Salt Lake a little bit north of here. So we basically have this kind of assistance to our local governments. Do a lot of data collection, crash and intersection analysis for our cities and towns when they ask for it. Pavement management. We do a lot of pavement management. We've probably done 112, 113 different cities with their pavement management. Signs and supports, of course, road safety audits, railroad crossings, and ADA ramps that we deal with also quite a bit with them. This happens to be a maintenance performance chart that we put together. It's got a lot of information on it that we put together over the years. Kind of take a look at it. Here's your remaining service life up here. Here's a brand new road on this side, and here's a well-used road on that side. We've got basically costs of each one of these treatment types. You can kind of see them here. They go all the way from about $30 up to just pennies, okay, per yard, or per mile, I mean. And so what we've got essentially was trying to keep our local governments in that realm up there if we can. You can kind of see it's $2, $3 a square yard at that point. But as soon as we get down into a little bit farther, just 2 or 3 more years, you're talking about anywhere from $12 to $8 a square yard. And then if you even miss that, it's going to end up with about all the way down to about $30 a square yard. So what we're trying to do is keep all these local governments in that particular range that they can afford. Now, some do, some make a good shot at it, and some don't. And generally speaking, if they wait too late, then they've got too many of their roads in pretty bad shape. You can kind of see, as I mentioned, the per square yard we've got on it. And this is the amount of additional service life, years of service life that it will give you at that point in time. So here is one, and you probably have seen roads in your area that maybe look like this also. Remaining service life of 0. Here's one about 2. So this is giving you a pretty good idea of what we're looking at. Here's a remaining service life road of about 4. Here's one of 6. You kind of see how it's starting to look a little bit better, and it's a little better shape. Okay, here's one of 8. And usually we try and catch these roads before they get past this 8. If we can, it's a lot cheaper to do with seal coats and that kind of stuff, and generally speaking, it's a lot less expensive for the government. Here's one of 10 years, remaining service life of 10 years. You can kind of see how each one starts looking a little better. 12 years, here's 14, and here's 16, and here's 20. Here's a fairly new road. And so what we're trying to do again is keep them. And this happens to be one of the cities and towns that we did evaluation for. We basically go on every single section of road and give it a remaining service life, and then kind of put it all together, and we can kind of see where they are on their system. And you can kind of see that the majority of theirs is 10 to 12 years of remaining service life in that particular instance. That's not bad. That's a good place to have it. However, once it starts getting past this point, this is starting to get pretty expensive down here, and so what we're trying to do is keep the remaining service life of these roads a little bit farther to this side over here to save them money over time. And that's what we've done. Probably 110 cities and towns, evaluated all of their roads for them, and give them the idea of what they need to be doing. Roads prioritized by, of course, arterials and collectors and locals in the local system. We're trying to keep it about 10 years of remaining service life, any given system in a town, for example, with no more than 3% in failed areas. Here's our chart a little bit again. And most of you have seen this probably 1,000 times if you're in the road business. But essentially, for each dollar you spend up in that top 2/3 of the bracket, it's going to cost you about $8 or $10 for the same amount down here. In the remaining last, it's 5 or 6 or 7 years. Maintenance funding for Utah, the A roads are the state roads, the B roads are the county roads, and the C roads, cities and towns, belong to the cities and towns. And so what we're trying to do is keep those roads in pretty decent shape rather than having them have to come back and fix a pretty sorry road that's going to cost a lot more than they have budgeted. This happens to be a cost index in Utah. It stops at about 14, but you can kind of see the costs, how they've road costs of more than doubled in that part, and now it goes up here. It's almost tripled in that period of time. And how many of you had your budgets tripled in that period of time? And that's basically the problem, obviously, that we all get to deal with. Basically, what most of these cities and towns are looking for ways to deal with the roads. One happens to be called a street utility. And what they do is it's just like a water utility or a sewer or a storm drain utility, and it's a street utility. And what they manage to do is charge each user $4 or $5 a month, and that basically gives them enough funding to keep a pretty good system in pretty good shape. So the street utility has a monthly charge for the road. There's about 8 or 10, it's about 11 cities now that use it. There's a monthly charge, for example. It's usually about $4 a resident per month. And then, depending on what kind of traffic is brought in from some of the other users, obviously theirs are probably higher than the $4 per month. And so, essentially, that's how these street utilities work. And it's working pretty well. We've got about 7 or 8 or 9 of them right now that are going. And actually, what they have is we found out that they finally got enough money to deal with the roads. Because they just lost so much territory over the last 12 or 14 years because essentially ascending cost of road materials. Gas tax increases. What they tried to do this last year is increase the gas tax by 4 or 5%, almost did nothing. And they were, at that time, they were thinking that the gas prices were going to go out of sight, which they never did. And I'm glad because I buy gas, you know. Generally speaking, it never did, and as a result, they weren't bringing any gas tax increases in to do their systems. And so what we ended up doing was do these street utilities for a lot of these cities and towns. That seems to work pretty well. They've got income stream to work with that's reliable. They can plan on things, and as a result, they're doing pretty well. Those that do not have a street utility yet are not doing as well. They're lucky to get a 5 or 6% increase in their funding every 3 years, you know, and so this is probably the best way that we have found, at least this last year or so, that seems to be helping most of these cities and towns become self-sufficient and actually can be able to have enough money to work on the roads, which they don't get out of the gas tax.
How was that street utility worked out? Is there anything in your state constitution that allows that, or was that something that somebody just came up with as kind of a brilliant idea?
They came, basically, it's a brilliant idea, and there was no law that said they couldn't do it. All right, very good. Thank you. I appreciate that.
The preceding video was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found at tsp2.org. That's tsp2.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.